Good Thursday morning. Welcome to another hour of Squawk on the Street. I'm Sarah Eisen with Carl Quintanilla and David Faber live, as always, from Post 9 of the New York Stock Exchange. Stocks in sell-off mode again. It's been a brutal few sessions here. The S&P is down 1.5%. NASDAQ taking it harder, down almost 2%. There's a chip sell-off going on, fueled by the Marvell numbers. That stock down sharply, but it's broad-based. Every sector is lower right now. Even the consumer staples, which are holding up, are a little bit lower, but it is tech stocks that are leading us lower again. That's kind of been a theme. Cyclical stocks also getting hit pretty hard. Take a look at treasuries. Obviously, it's been a story of those lower yields. A little bit firmer today. The 10-year yield, 4.3%. Also, those higher German yields, maybe leading to some sort of global bond route. The 2-year yield, though, is a little bit lower, just below 4%, Carl.
We're going to talk to the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in a moment, right after wholesale trade. Hey, Rick Santelli.
Yes, I'll tell you, these numbers go right along with today's trade deficit. If you look at the January final read on wholesale inventories, it was up 0.8%, up 0.8%. Why is that so important? That's the biggest inventory wholesale increase since, yes, you guessed it, August of 22. And if you looked at this morning's trade deficit, it had a record number of imports, up 10% to 401 billion versus exports, which were 267 billion. Tariff front running is definitely having an effect here, and you can see it in all the numbers. Now, the sales side of this equation, wow. And this also gives us an idea why we're seeing these deficits skyrocket. The inventories are coming in, but the sales, they were down 1.3%. That is almost 3 times more than expectations in the other direction. We're expecting up 0.5%. We're down 1.3. In the rearview mirror, though, to be fair, there was a big revision in December from up 1% to 1.4. So you can see as we go more into 2025, that front-running dynamic just becomes exaggerated. The real key here is how it all turns out, because ultimately, if this is artificially negatively affecting what we may be looking at for GDP, when it reverses, it's going to have the opposite effect, and it's going to boost the numbers. In both cases, the exaggerations probably don't really mean as much as the superficial numbers. Carl and the gang, back to you.
Okay, Rick, thank you very much. And yeah, there are some expectations that we might see negative growth for first quarter, but a lot of it skewed by front-running those tariffs, as Rick said. Let's get some reaction from the White House on President Trump's latest tariff moves. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick joins us now. Secretary Lutnick, welcome. Good to see you.
Great to see you.
It's been a bit of a roller coaster, so we'll start with the latest news, which is the breathing room that President Trump is giving to the automakers a month now for those tariffs on Mexico and Canada. Why 1 month, and why just the automakers?
So it's not likely to be just the automakers. I mean, the president is going to decide this today, but he's talking about it. But I think it's likely that it will cover all USMCA compliant goods and services. So that which is part of President Trump's deal with Canada and Mexico are likely to get an exemption from these tariffs now. This comes from that Canada has done an enormous amount. They've offered us an enormous amount of work on fentanyl, and so is Mexico. Matter of fact, the president and I are speaking to our Mexican counterparties later today, this morning. So we think this is likely. The likely outcome will be sort of in the middle. So USMCA compliant goods and services will be excluded, and everything else. So if you think about it this way, if you lived under Donald Trump's U.S., Mexico, and Canada agreement, you will get a reprieve from the tariffs now. And if you chose to go outside of that, you did so at your own risk. And today is when that reckoning comes.
Now, you will get a reprieve now for 1 month, or you will get a reprieve altogether from these new tariffs?
Well, the reprieve is for 1 month. Remember, the month now is about fentanyl and about the border. So they've been working hard to close the border, but we're not seeing the reduced number of deaths, of autopsy deaths from fentanyl. And the president is just right on that topic. He is going to protect American lives, and he's being very, very tough on it. But let's face it, if you're not tough on protecting American lives, what's the point of being the president of the United States? He's so strong and focused on protecting American lives, and he's going to crack down and make sure this fentanyl is not coming in. That's why he's raised the tariff on China. Remember, in 2019, President Xi offered Donald Trump, when he was president, that he would put the death penalty on anybody who made the fentanyl ingredients. And the president is looking to get that in place, stop these ingredients and stop fentanyl coming in. Now, April 2nd is when we begin our reciprocal tariffs. So if you think about it, what he said was, okay, between now and April 2nd, I'm just going to give USMCA, I'm going to set that aside from these tariffs, but just for this month. And then on April 2nd, it's not that this reprieve starts, it's that on April 2nd, the reciprocal tariffs start. How you treat us is how we expect to treat you. And you have no idea what Canada does. I mean, the dairy products and all this other stuff, it's got to end.
So, and I have a lot of questions about April 2nd, but first on the fentanyl, you said that he wants to see fewer deaths. Is that the metric here for when these tariffs end? I mean, because according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents, only seized 43 pounds of fentanyl at the Canadian border last year. So is that a metric? Do we want to see that go down to zero? How are you judging when they've done enough?
Well, how funny is that, right? Like, if I seize less, does that mean, like, the stuff they haven't seized hasn't gone through? I think autopsy death, as horrible as that is to say, should be the statistic.
But a lot of it is Americans smuggling it over, right? It's not just Canadians.
Well, look, crooks are crooks, but I got to stop the flow across our border. We've got to stop the flow that has these ingredients being made in Canada and in Mexico coming into our country. We've got to close the border, which we're doing a better job of, obviously record low numbers, but we need to see fentanyl deaths decline. So that is the statistic.
So are we looking
at
daily autopsy deaths? Like, how do we do that? How, as a business, do you figure out what that's going to look like and when it ends?
Well, I think what you see is that this month, my expectation is the president will come to the agreement today, and hopefully we will announce this today, that USMCA compliant goods will not have a tariff for the next month until April 2nd. That includes the autos, and the autos were the lead in getting this deal done. But also Canada and Mexico have done a good job offering us ever more work to prove to us they're going to cut the fentanyl deaths. And then April 2nd, we're going to move into the reciprocal tariffs, and hopefully Mexico and Canada will have done a good enough job on fentanyl that this part of the conversation will be off the table, and we'll move just to the reciprocal tariff conversation. But if they haven't, this will stay on. Black and white, this will stay on. We need to protect American lives.
Is there any discussions with China about what they're doing on fentanyl ingredients and deaths, which I know has been a problem?
Well, President Xi offered President Trump in 2019 that he would put the death penalty on if you made the ingredients for fentanyl and opioids. He offered it in 2019, and he didn't do it. And the president has heard that and said, I'm looking for that. End fentanyl ingredient production in China. Just end it, or you're going to pay 20%, and they're paying 20%. So it's a win-win. If they stop, great, we save Americans. And if they refuse to stop, right, then the cost of their refusing to stop gets higher and higher and higher.
100%, but there's also a cost for American business and American jobs and American farmers. I mean, last time around, 2018, 2019, the Trump administration had to subsidize the farmers. Well, guess what? China just slapped 15% tariffs on U.S. agriculture. So is there going to be payments to them?
No, I think what's going to happen is when you get to reciprocal tariffs, you're going to see the most positive, explosive benefit to American farmers in the history of America. I mean, that is what's coming. We are going to use our tariffs to knock down the protectionist walls of the world. We have let everybody into our market, and they have blocked us, all of these markets. I mean, we had Modi in from India, and he was bragging he has 1.4 billion people, and those 1.4 billion people won't buy a bushel of American corn. This is going to end, and Donald Trump is on it, and on April 2nd, he is going to start smashing down those walls and letting our American farmers thrive in the world. They have Stockholm Syndrome. They've never been able to actually export the way they should. Our farmers, our ranchers, right, our fishermen, this has got to end. We need to be able to export, and we're going to break the walls of all these countries that protect themselves and let us in. We let you in, you let us in.
100%. But the problem is then they go into retaliation mode. So we sell a lot of agricultural products to China. It's an important market for our farmers. And now there's higher tariffs. So it makes our farmers less competitive on the world stage. And if we go into more tariffs, then they will just do more back. And I guess where does that end up?
Okay, look, this month is about fentanyl, and the president is very, very focused on saving American lives. First and foremost, this month, the month of March, is about saving Americans' lives from fentanyl. But come April 2nd, we're going to focus on breaking down these barriers. So it's a couple of weeks away, but we are going to smash down the barriers of trade. America has left itself wide open. We have a 2.5% tariff, and even the VAT is 20%. It's amazing. India has almost 50% on average. China over 50% on average. I mean, you've got huge tariffs, non-tariff trade barriers. And here's what I learned yesterday. You know what the Chinese do? When the government buys products, they pay 20% premium to the key companies so they can subsidize them, so they can attack us. This stuff is going to end, and Donald Trump is on it, and he is going to end it. And America has never seen the growth that it's going to feel as Donald Trump rips down the barriers that these other countries have put out, rip down these walls, and let our farmers and our ranchers and our fishermen thrive.
So, Secretary Lutnick, then, what are your expectations on April 2nd, given the data you're taking in right now? How significant are the tariffs going to be in your mind at this point? Do you have a sense as to what it's going to look like, more broadly speaking, here with all of our trading partners?
Well, if our trading partners did nothing, then obviously, let's say a trading partner has a 20% tariff rate on us, then I guess we would have a 20% tariff rate on them. And they won't go up because if they go up, we'll go up. And my expectation is it starts high and then it starts coming down. But most importantly, those trade barriers come down, our ability to export completely explodes, and then what you're going to see is massive importing of factories, production. I mean, the scale of people going to come and build in the greatest economy in the world is the likes of which no one's ever seen. When the president says the golden age is coming, I mean, I'm meeting with these companies. They're all coming. The big car companies, they're all bringing it back. Everybody's going to do manufacturing here. The growth rate in American production. Remember, every trillion of investment in America is 1 point of GDP. And he's already brought in, he announced the other day, 1.3 trillion, and the factories are coming, and it's going to be massive.
If I could come back for a moment just to follow up on the MCA compliant component here of overall trade. Do you know what the percentage is in terms of Mexico and Canada from our imports that is MCA compliant?
I think it's over 50%.
Okay. So at least 50% for the next month will not be receiving that 25% tariff of imports from Mexico and Canada.
Well,
sort of fair to say that?
I said that was just a cuff. I mean, there are lots of people who know the precision, but I'm on live with you, so I'm just giving you my best guess.
Yeah, understood. I wanted to follow up as well. There's a Wall Street Journal story today, Secretary Lutnick, on the background of the talks, trying to avert the tariffs from Mexico and Canada, and they refer to talks between their negotiators and you as well. And they said they struggled to make their case to President Trump through what they call a phalanx of intermediaries. And they say at times those intermediaries, and I think they're referring as well to yourself perhaps, are unsure what the president wanted. Can you respond to that? Are you unsure of what President Trump wants?
Look, I love when the fake news comes up with nonsense just to sell a newspaper. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. The president is he loves to communicate. He calls everybody all the time. I speak to him all the time. You've got to be kidding me. The president knows exactly what he wants. We know exactly what he wants. And our job is to try to execute exactly what he wants. But anybody says that his advisors don't know what he's thinking are silly.
So you communicated fully with your counterparts in Mexico and Canada, for example, exactly what the president wants, I assume.
Like yesterday and the day before yesterday, of course. Like, come on. I mean, this is so silly. This is really important stuff. And to actually have a news reporter come up with such nonsense like that, I mean, how much time do we really have to spend on things that are really just pathetic?
Well, let me ask you this, Secretary Lutnick. Does the president want a rising stock market? Because we do have stocks 6% off the highs, and confidence is being shaken here a little bit around business. I know you guys wanted lower interest rates, and you're getting that, but kind of for the wrong reasons, because now there's worries about growth and potentially recession because of a trade war.
The president wants American growth and American prosperity. Okay, and the fact if the stock market goes down 0.5% or 1%, it goes up 0.5% or 1%, that is not the driving force of our outcomes. Our outcomes are driven by, we want factory production in America. We want employment to explode in America. We want training for the new AI industrial revolution to happen in America. We're going to bring factories back to America. We're going to rebuild Michigan. We're going to rebuild Ohio. Why do those auto plants go to Canada? Why would we have auto plants go from Michigan to Canada? Why is that in our community's interest? We want to rebuild steel and aluminum.
Right.
The president is focused on rebuilding America, and you are going to see growth in America. You're going to see an interest rate when we balance the budget of the United States. You're going to see interest rates drop 1% or more. You're going to see the stock market explode. And if it doesn't do it tomorrow, that's because people just don't understand that they should be betting on Donald Trump. If I were them and I were your viewers, I would understand the long-term trade of Donald Trump is you bet on him, and he is a winner, and he is going to win for America.
Well, we are going to obviously be able to find out, specific to auto manufacturing, because you've mentioned it a number of times. I mean, there are plenty of automobiles manufactured in this country, not just domestically by Ford or GM, but also many foreign companies as well, Secretary Lutnick. And they have supply chains that they've spent years sort of figuring out where things should be made to try to be, my sense is, as competitive as they can be globally. Do you think by moving everything back as you describe it, that they're going to be able to be competitive globally? Aren't prices ultimately going to actually have to rise?
I think if you want to buy things from other countries and you want to bring it into America, then the price is going to rise. But if you make it here, then of course the price won't rise. So make it here. Make it here. How hard is that to say? Just keep repeating it to yourself. There's no tariff if you make it here. So TSMC, the biggest chip manufacturer, says, okay, I'll make it here. You're going to watch everybody come to that realization. Apple, who builds it all in China. Why are they building it all in China and giving us our iPhone? Why don't they make it here? They used to say we don't have...
It's cheaper.
One answer, Mr. Secretary, is that wages are lower over there.
And now there are robots who can do it. You're going to see robotic production of iPhones and the jobs that are going to be created, people who build those factories, the mechanics who work on those robots. These jobs are going to be millions and millions of those jobs. These are great, high-paying jobs, and you don't need a college education to do it. This is the recreation of tradecraft in the United States of America, and Donald Trump is on it. He's bringing it back, and you are going to see Apple. Why did Apple say they're going to invest $500 billion in America? Because they're going to build the robots to build their iPhones in America.
That's the first time I've heard you, Mr. Secretary, merge the notions of reshoring and robotics, that somehow this is going to be two parts of the same story.
That's where it's coming from. I mean, how can Apple move? Like, if you look at Foxconn, who makes iPhones, right? They have 2.5 million people who work for them in China. And, of course, you know, the worst statistic I can tell you about that is they have the highest suicide rate of any company in the world, because they have these people live there and work there and live there and work there. That's just not an American way. How can we compete with that labor? The answer is robotics are going to do it better and cheaper. And the key to robotics is going to be American AI and American intuition and the American technology. It's all coming here. It's coming here now. And we need the people to fix them, to build these factories. Right. I mean, the scale by which these great jobs are coming to America is going to be amazing.
So, all right, because robots usually replace people, but you think that ultimately it's going to create jobs?
Oh, I'm sure of it. You're going to see my department is going to come out with a plan that has a guarantee. If you go into the training program, you will be guaranteed a job making more than $125,000, and we're going to have 5 million jobs available. And those jobs are going to be offered by who? By Apple, by TSMC, by SoftBank, by OpenAI. They all need to build their factories, maintain their factories, and operate their factories. These are a different kind of electrician, a different kind of plumber, HVAC people, a different kind of mechanic. These are the people who work on high tech like airplanes. And there's going to be millions of these jobs, and these jobs are going to make America great again from its workforce rebuilding. Automakers are going to come back. Everybody's coming back.
T-shirts,
this is the golden
sneakers,
age,
towels,
and you're talking about it today.
Are we going to make all those things in the United States? None of them are made here. TVs, electronics.
Why did we stop? Because we entered into an illogical world of low tariffs here and high tariffs there. So everybody could go find the cheapest place in the world. I mean, think about it. Why would a factory that was making cars in Michigan move to Canada? Because I tell you why. Because they did it because there weren't unions in these locations. We harmed American workers in exchange for what? The prices of cars didn't come down.
Yeah.
Donald Trump understands it. He's going to bring it back.
I don't mean to, I know you got to go, but I wanted to ask one question about something you've said previously. A number of investors have brought it to my attention. The VIE structure, this involves China as well. It's this tax-efficient structure, so to speak, that companies such as Alibaba use, for example, where they establish in a tax-friendly jurisdiction, the Cayman Islands and things of that nature. I believe you said previously you guys are looking at it. I'm just curious if that's the case and whether there's any update on that.
There are so many tax scams. I mean, how about Ireland has a $60 billion trade surplus? We're running a $2 trillion deficit, and they have a surplus. Why? Do you think the Irish 5 million people are doing something? No, it's all tech companies and pharmaceutical companies who figured out a way around our tax program, and they stuck their IP there. How about every ship you've ever seen? You ever seen a commercial vessel with an American flag on the back? You see Liberian flag or a Panamanian flag because they're not paying tax in America. We are on it. We are going to fix it. We are going to make it fair. We're going to take the waste, fraud, and abuse out. We're going to get these tax scams out. People are going to pay American fairly, and we are going to balance the budget for the United States of America.
I was going to ask what you're going to do with the tariff revenues, whether that could go into funding the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
No, it's going to reduce the deficit and balance the budget of the United States of America.
And replace
It's the External Revenue Service. Say External Revenue Service. We all have this, we think we're supposed to pay taxes on the Internal Revenue Service. How about we replace it the way Donald Trump thinks about it with the External Revenue Service? Let the people who live off of our economy pay, and we'll pay less. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax for our Social Security. I mean, come on. This president is on it, and he is going to deliver.
Finally, Secretary Lutnick, I mean, we know you well. You've come on so many times as the head of Cantor, and I do wonder what your conversations are like with fellow CEOs right now who, I think saw a really big spike in confidence after the election. They were excited about deregulation. They were excited about tax cuts, and now they're wondering about this trade war and what their cost structure is going to look like and what they're going to have to do with jobs. How are those conversations going?
those conversations are much more optimistic and positive than you think. They said, we can bring it back. The automakers, we can bring it back in 6 months. People say, okay, can you give me accelerated depreciation? And the answer is the president has said he wants to give accelerated depreciation. He wants to figure out how to help companies bring their factories back to America. So it's a win-win, right? If they bring their factory back, we get the work here, and if they don't bring it back, then we get tariff revenue that pays off our deficit. So we are going. You see, I speak to all these CEOs all the time. It's sort of all day, every day. I'm either speaking to a foreign trade minister or a CEO, and we're always talking about how to bring it back. Accelerated depreciation is one. And then other ways that we are working on with the president to come up with ways to incent people to build your factory here. And we're going to come up with a lot of cool ways to do it. That's why I talk to all these companies, because we go back and forth figuring it out. But I tell you what, this is going to be exceptional and extraordinary for American growth. And that's what the president is focused on. American growth and making sure we have no deficit, because if we have no deficit, you're going to get 10-year interest rates more like in the 2.5% range, and you're going to have mortgages rates come smashing down, and we're going to have energy prices come smashing down as we drill, baby, drill. And people just don't understand the power of America in the hands of Donald Trump is going to be amazing.
Well, we've seen oil prices come down, rates come down, mortgage rates start to come down. I mean, it's starting. Thank you, Secretary Lutnick. We certainly appreciate the transparency and all the time.
All right. I love spending time with you. Thanks.
Thank you, Howard Lutnick. By the way, the stock market cutting losses in half. The Dow is down 600 at the lows. We're down 300 now. Programming note, more from the new administration tomorrow. Treasury Secretary Bessent will join Squawk Box at 7 a.m. Eastern time. Guys, I think the important parts of that is, first of all, expanded reprieve for everyone compliant with USMCA, whether it's the 50% that he said or maybe more than that. Now you'll get businesses rushing to them to try to prove that. So that shows a little bit of maybe leniency when it comes to the tariffs on Mexico and Canada, and just painting the picture of what they're trying to do here.
They're trying to completely restructure the global trading system.
Manufacturing in the U.S.
Obviously, Secretary Lutnick has incredibly ambitious goals and says amazing things are coming, but you do something like this, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of complexity.
Meantime, as we've been talking to him, Trudeau's on the tape, says he expects Canada and the U.S. to be in a trade war for the foreseeable future. We didn't get to ask the Secretary his pain threshold for a boycott of U.S. spirits or an impact on U.S. tourism. Canada is the biggest international visitor to this country. Every year, 20 million visits, a couple $1 billion in spend.
No, there's an impact, and there are consequences. We got the Brown-Forman CEO on in the next hour, and they're worried about being taken off of Canadian shelves. But we did ask about his pain threshold for the market, which I think is important, because he said, and here's the quote, "The stock market is not driving the outcomes for this administration, and you wouldn't be smart not to bet on Donald Trump ultimately, because if we do see rates come down, as the budget balances, if this goes according to plan, that should be very stimulative to the U.S. economy. It's a big if."
Yeah, a lot of big ifs. All right. Although Mr. Lutnick is very certain, it would seem.
It's his job.
As we head to a break, let's give you a roadmap for the rest of the hour. The street's reaction to those delayed auto tariffs, what's ahead for that industry and the stocks.
The chip sector is in a bear market territory as another AI darling fails to meet estimates. We're going to talk about what this sell-off in semis means for names like NVIDIA.
And investors bracing for the big employment report tomorrow. Closer look at how DOGE cuts could impact those numbers. Big show still ahead. As we've said, market recovering from an earlier sell-off, though still a little bit lower across the board. We'll be right back.